I mentioned I can't tell you how many times I've died in DayZ, but how many times I've been saved by crafting in DayZ. And once you know how to craft, it kind of becomes really not easy, but you start to kind of go like more of a better tier of survivor when you do it.
If you can remember the recipes. That's where I have a problem with crafting saving my life is in DayZ is trying to remember all the recipes. There's no list. There is a list if you want to Google it. But there's no list in the game. There's no recipe tree. There's nothing that says, "Hey, I want to craft this, so you need to add these two items together." Nothing like that. It's all up here or on your second monitor.
There are recipes still to this day that I don't 100% remember all the time. And it's kind of cool because there are sometimes when you rediscover a recipe and you're all like, wait, that's how you do it? Oh. And you probably knew it before, but you also just redid it. The other cool thing I love about it is that there are recipes even I didn't know. Like I saw the other day on Cam Can't Run was that if you take a pair of pliers to barbed wire, you can make metal wire.
Interesting. uh for me the thing about the recipes in DayZ for me is that some of them make sense. I guess in a sense taking a pair of pliers to barbed wire to make regular wire kind of makes sense, but then there's certain other things that don't really make sense to me. Rags to rope for an example kind of makes sense because they don't have like another rope alternative, but to me like you can't put rags together and make an actual rope. You could make a rope rag, or Project Zomboid, you make like a sheet rope out of rags and rope or rags together, like, so it kind of makes sense, but it kind of doesn't. And that's one of those ones that I always forget I can make. Just take a few rags, throw them together, make rope, and rope's useful for so many other crafting recipes.
I'm gonna hate you if one of the next couple of updates they decide to change that recipe and now you can make rag rope, but you can't use it like regular rope. Yeah, I'm gonna look at you for that one.
It'll
Okay.
it'll be my fault. I'll take claim of that one.
But no, there are so many cool crafting recipes that really help for your survival. If you're always starving, one of the tips is to go around and look at under fruit trees, right? Well, the other one that I really enjoy, and I actually kind of started doing this when I was playing the Frostline map, it was the snare. All you have to do is take a metal wire, a short stick, and you can make a snare and just put a worm on it. That's all you have to do. And with any knife, you can get a worm out of the ground, which brings me to my next fun crafting item, the stone knife. It only takes one stone, which only holds up one slot, to make a stone knife. You now are able to make a snare, and then you're able to make a stone knife. Boom, you can get a worm, and voila, probably like 5 or 10 minutes later, it goes off. I don't think it actually cares about your proximity because I've caught things 10 feet away from it, all the way up to like, you know, half a town over.
I think you need to clarify one thing about the stone knife is yes, you only need one stone technically in your inventory, but otherwise you're gonna need at least a boulder, which is arguably a bigger stone that you can't put in your inventory. You can't just magically take one stone and create a bone knife or a stone knife out of it. But you're right. You don't necessarily need two. You don't have to have both of them taking up your inventory slots. You just have to find the other piece of the puzzle to make the stone knife. Um, that kind of brings me to my thoughts on my experiments with crafting recently. Is there's a lot of things that you can make, kind of like rudimentary tools, not quite enough to just be able to be like a nomad in DayZ where you just stay out in the woods and survive, but you can get very, very close without having to go into a town. You can build backpacks, you can build shelters, you can build spears, all of that stuff, short of like axes and things to actually build full bases.
Yeah, I definitely can agree on all of that. However, you couldn't survive out there. You could barely catch a fish.
That's one of the things I did try. I did try the both the fish traps. I tried an improvised fishing pole and a regular fishing pole, and I never caught a single thing. Now, I didn't really give the fishing trap a fair chance, to be honest, because I didn't realize that I needed to put a worm in it. I just kind of threw it in the water, and then later on realized I needed to put some bait in it, and didn't have enough time to let it sit after that. But I used the fishing pole for a good like 15 minutes at one point. Nothing. And to be honest, I don't even know what I was looking for. So maybe I did get something and just didn't pull up the line in time. I have no idea.
I do know that as a new player, you may have this happen to you more often, which is bloody hands when you cut up like a rabbit or even a fish, you can get bloody hands from. If you just take two rags into your hands, you can make improvised gloves. And if you have those on, you don't get bloody hands, which makes it a lot easier to cook and eat real quick because we're not always close to a body of water or anything like that. And it can really mess up because if you run around bloody hands for like a couple of minutes or even 10 to 20 minutes, you're going to eventually eat from your hands and not remember they're bloodied, which gets you the sickness. And if you don't have enough food, you're going to get worse, etc., etc. So I actually really like the improvised gloves. And I like most of the improvised gear overall, but the gloves for me are vital to survival in the beginning.
It's one of the first things I craft anymore in DayZ is the improvised gloves for that reason. Because when I first started, I would always forget and I would always end up with bloody hands and I would always end up eating something and getting sick. And you guys would always ask me at some point, I'd be like, guys, I'm sick again. And you're like, did you eat with bloody hands? And I'm like, I forgot I don't have gloves this time because I died for my last character I had gloves. So now the minute I find rags or the minute I find a knife and a pair of clothing a piece of clothing that I can cut into rags, I'm immediately making gloves. If I haven't already looted some gloves, I'm making those improvised gloves right away.
Kind of going along this use of things that are around you is I like ammo boxes, nails, headlight boxes, any kind of thing that I have to open that returns a piece of paper. And the reason why I like this is because it is tinder. When you open a package, it does not matter how wet it is, everything, when you open it, you'll get a piece of paper that's completely dry, and you can use that to use it as tinder to light your fire, whether it's in the stove, out in the world, whatever. And I always like that. So like, even if I find a headlight and I have no intention of getting a car, I'll take the headlight box.
And that's one less piece of the fireplace or fuel for a stove that you have to go find if you already have that paper in your inventory or you have that box of nails or the box of ammo or the headlight in your inventory already.
Definitely. And like, I think I've made this mistake a couple of times, but every single stove and fireplace inside of buildings already has a fireplace like UI in it. So if you walk up with sticks, paper, bark, logs, and you look at left click, you'll put it in there, and voila, the whole UI will pop up. You don't have to make a fireplace kit and put it inside of the inside fireplaces or stoves.
One thing that I specifically need to remember is the different kind of backpacks you can craft yourself. Because one thing that I am known for in any survival game is carrying way too much stuff or having to throw stuff down because I'm over encumbered or I'm out of inventory slots, blah blah blah. And DayZ can be brutal sometimes, both finding supplies, but especially backpacks. But there's a bunch of different ways you can make backpacks. You can make backpacks out of pelts from animals if you have pelts and rope. You can do that with burlap sacks and rope, and then you can turn that courier bag you make into an improvised backpack with sticks. You can do it with a dry sack and rope. There's several different ways that you can make your own backpacks. Now, the burlap sacks you have to find, obviously, and the dry bags you have to find. If you've got a weapon and you come across an animal, you can at least get the fur piece. And if you have the rope or you have rags or guts, you can make the rope and turn that into a backpack.
Oh, right there. That's another recipe I really enjoy. Being able to use a knife on guts to make a rope. The other one that I really enjoy, and it's kind of a recipe, but not really a recipe, I guess, is the improvised shelter. These are godsends as you're a early Bambi, because if you do what I say about getting stone knives, following the trails and getting those, as well as, looking for a nice area with a bunch of sticks, you can actually build these improvised shelters. And I suggest the stick one you should use. The reason why I like this one that I mentioned is because when you place it against the trees or bushes near trees, you can almost make it blend in. And unless somebody is following you to that place or stumbles across it randomly, for the most part, it really blends in with the environment. Now, the leather one looks cool, and I know the tarp one is also cool, but both of those require you to have, I think, like a 3x5 slot minimum for to hold materials to use that.
One of the things you always point out about that shelter is that it's not conspicuous. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. If you put it in the right spot, it's kind of hidden. The other two stick out massively. We when we did our base building episode before, we talked about that, and we went in experimental or the user tools, and we actually built those things so I could see what they look like and I could see what went into them. And the other two, yeah, they you can almost not miss those once they're set up. So the stick shelter is definitely, if you're going for hidden and you're trying to hide your base, it's definitely the one to go for sure.
Another thing I like to do, dimension, is when I'm running around, I will go out, grab the iodine, the disinfectant bottle, or the cleaning spray. Now, the reasons why I like to grab these is because you can use it to disinfect rags, or if you hold it in your hand after being attacked by an infected and maybe you won against the infected, if it says disinfect wounds, that means that you have an infected wound, which will turn into a more bigger sickness. So if you disinfect it right away, you'll get that little pill symbol. It lasts for 5 minutes and it will get rid of the infection. So that's why I like to grab at least one of those and like keep them in my inventory. So every time I get cut by an infected, I just bandage myself up, pull one of those out, and goes, oh yeah, I need to make sure I sanitize my wound.
There is another basic thing you can make out in the woods that I want to ask you about. It's the improvised cooking stand. Now, I know how to set up a fire. I know how to sharpen a stick and put one piece of meat on a stick and sit there and cook that, as Red can attest to, because he's been taken out while I was cooking before and I didn't help. But that's another story for another time. Can you use that to cook more than one item at a time?
It's more of a way to put your cooking pot on so you can put the pieces of meat in so it cooks. Now, because the fire does damage the cooking pot and the tripod, which is, the one you're talking about, the improvised one, that thing will probably last you on a fire, probably like, I think, 10 to 20 minutes max.
So you need a cooking pot to go along. I mean, that makes sense because the picture I saw of it has a cooking pot on it, but the recipe apparently only requires sticks, and I was like, I don't know how that works, but whatever. I guess that makes sense why I was never able to actually use it. Okay.
My best advice to you now that you've played DayZ for a little bit, look at the icons for the attachments. Like the campfire, you saw that there was probably a three-pronged item looking there that is for a tripod, including the improvised one. I can't stress enough how much effort DayZ goes to try to make things look like what they're supposed to be attached to. I think we've talked about all of the recipes that I think are vital to crafting. I know there's probably a ton that I haven't already covered. You can play DayZ throughout the entire thing without crafting a single goddamn thing, but crafting makes life easier.
When I first started playing DayZ and I didn't know any of the recipes, you guys taught me a few like my first day playing, but for me, I spent a lot of time doing no crafting runs and just trying to survive on what I was looting. And I'm realizing now that, like you said, crafting makes your life so much easier in DayZ, even if it's just like the simplest things to get you started until you find that better tier loot when you're actually looting a town, the gloves, the backpacks, things like that. That stuff will literally change how rough you have it until you find those better tier items. It can mean the difference between life and death. It can literally save your life having the hand wraps or the backpack or an improvised spear, for example. Smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe.